Welcome to the debate. I want you to imagine a figure skater launching into a quadruple axel.
Oh, the 4.5 rotations?
Exactly, yeah. Just suspended in the air before landing on this tiny single blade of steel. I mean, to you and me watching from the stands, it looks like pure, uninhibited freedom.
Right. It looks like magic.
It looks like magic. But mathematically, that jump is a rigid, terrifyingly precise cage of variation control. If the skater's takeoff angle deviates by, a fraction of a degree, or their limb spread varies by an inch, the result is not magic.
No, it is a violent collision with the ice.
Yeah, it really is. So today we are exploring this fascinating tension to answer a central question. What is the true definition of self-directed growth? In an age where artificial intelligence is, fundamentally changing how we build our capabilities.
And that is the defining challenge of our current technological era, right? We are suddenly handed these tools that can generate profound structural complexity in seconds.
Instantly, yeah.
And we have to figure out how to actually integrate that into human capability without just becoming, passive operators.
Right, which is why our goal today is to unpack the complex architecture of human mastery. We want to explain the meaning of self-directed growth in a way that is really easy to understand and accessible.
Uncomplicated it a bit.
Exactly. We are looking at this through the lens of two opposing forces: authentic controllability versus mechanical optimization. And this brings us to our core academic disagreement. What is the fundamental driver of authentic, self-directed growth?
The million-dollar question.
Right. So I will be arguing that the internal, human anchor of meaning and purpose is the ultimate driver. It's the human reason for engaging with the work that transforms an external structure into a real, internalized capability. Without that personal meaning, any system of control simply devolves into a cage of sterile efficiency.
And I will be arguing that rigorous variation control and the strict execution of what we call the metacognitive audit, those are the true engines of growth. Meaning is a wonderful sentiment.
It's more than a sentiment.
Well, sure, but meaning alone cannot protect us from the dangerous illusion of mastery known as false fluency. The true driver of growth is the systematic observation and reduction of error at the boundary of our limitations.
Okay. Let me clearly lay out my perspective here. When we talk about self-directed growth, this concept of authentic control, I argue it is defined entirely by its internal origin. It is a process of meaningful self-shaping.
Okay.
To understand it, you really have to contrast it with mechanical optimization. Because mechanical optimization is an external force. It acts as a cage. It demands speed and compliance.
The whole produce more, produce faster mindset.
Exactly. Its mottos are keep up and produce more, which basically treats the human being as a bottleneck in a system that just wants faster output. But authentic control is entirely different. It asks, what can I truly own?
Right, but how does that actually work with AI?
Well, there is a precise dynamic at play here when we introduce modern tools. The formula is basically this. AI builds the structure. Practice makes it reliable, but meaning makes it mine.
Meaning makes it mine.
Yes.
True growth occurs because the human provides that crucial third pillar. We provide the reason to stay in the friction. Without meaning, there is no voluntary attention. And without voluntary attention, you cannot possibly transform an external, AI-generated scaffold into an internalized human logic. Meaning is the engine that drives the entire process.
I come at it from a different way.
I figured you might.
Yeah. I argue that self-directed growth is fundamentally a structural achievement. It is based on statistical process control, specifically the rigorous reduction of meaningless variation. Let's make this intuitive for a second. Think of human capacity as a cup.
Okay, a cup.
An AI-generated structure is a pitcher of water. Modern AI can rapidly generate complex code bases, strategic outlines, dense analytical reports in seconds. It pours the water.
And it pours it fast. Exactly. But if that water pours faster or in a greater volume than the human cup can actually hold, it creates overflow.
Ah, right.
That overflow is false fluency. You possess this incredibly impressive artifact on your screen, but you do not own the thinking behind it. Self-directed growth is not about feeling a warm sense of purpose. It is the highly technical discipline of finding your specific edge of capacity.
But let me just finish this thought. It's about actively observing where your performance wavers, stabilizing that variation, and actively reducing the noise until your capability actually becomes reliable. So meaning might be the beautiful destination you're driving toward, but systematic defect reduction is the engine and the wheel. Okay, but to really clarify this for anyone navigating a modern workflow, we have to look at the psychological environment where this growth actually happens. And that comes down to how a system treats mistakes.
Fair enough.
Under the cage of mechanical optimization, mistakes are treated strictly as threats. They are, deviations that ruin efficiency, which naturally creates an environment of fear and compression.
The muted choral environment.
Yes, exactly. You operate in a state of muted choral. It's this constant diagnostic warning, a sense of artificial force and danger, telling you to just fix the error and hurry up. Authentic control, on the other hand, creates a sky-blue environment.
A sky blue environment.
Yeah, it provides breathable cognitive space. Under authentic control, mistakes are not threats. They are just neutral data points telling you exactly where your edge of capacity currently sits. Authentic control builds a stable, forgiving architecture that you can safely return to after a failure.
So you can reshape it.
Right. So you can revise, reshape, and continue. It opens space rather than compressing the individual.
Well, I will grant you that the sky blue space sounds incredibly appealing, but we have to be brutally honest about the mechanics of how that space is actually constructed. You do not get open space just because you have good intentions or meaningful connection to your work.
I never said it was just good intentions.
But that breathable space is bought and paid for by technical stabilization. Let's go back to your opening example of Ilya Malinen's quadruple axel.
Okay.
To land that jump, he has to pull his arms and legs in incredibly tight to minimize his moment of inertia. He has to stabilize his axis deviation down to the millimeter. If he does not rigorously, technically control those structural variables, the result isn't a beautiful expression of artistry. It is a disaster.
Sure, the physics demand it.
Right. The open, breathtaking space of a successful jump is entirely dependent on rigid technical variation control.
I see what you think that, but let me give you a different perspective. You are focusing entirely on the mechanism of reducing variation, but we have to ask why the skater puts themselves through that rigorous control in the first place.
To land the jump.
Well, yes, but this is where the variation control matrix comes into play. The skater does not control their axis wobble just for the sake of becoming a robotic, flawless machine. They are reducing, quote, meaningless variation, so the structural skewness, the takeoff instability specifically, to clear cognitive bandwidth for meaningful freedom.
Meaningful freedom.
Yes, that's the artistry, the connection to the music, the dynamic flow that makes the performance human. If the skater is fighting systemic variance in the air, 100% of their cognitive attention is consumed by basic survival.
Physical repair. Yeah.
Right. By stabilizing the foundation, they free up their mind. The variation reduction is entirely in service of human expression. The control is not the end goal, it is merely the servant of the meaning.
But the servant is doing the actual heavy lifting. I mean, you can have all the desire for artistic expression in the world, but if your axis is skewed, you still fall.
Well, obviously.
And this distinction becomes critically urgent when we bring artificial intelligence into the picture. Because AI fundamentally disrupts this foundational process by artificially raising the starting line. It completely bypasses the blank page.
Which, I mean, for anyone who has ever stared at a blinking cursor for 3 hours is a massive advantage. It eliminates the friction of initiation.
It is an advantage, absolutely. But it introduces a catastrophic risk, which is logic blindness.
Logic blindness. Okay, explain that.
Let's ground this in a real-world scenario. Imagine a junior analyst who needs to write a complex Python script to automate a data pipeline.
Okay.
They ask an AI to write it. 10 seconds later, they have a flawless, highly advanced script. They run it, it works, and they possess the artifact. But because they did not struggle through the variation of the blank page themselves.
They didn't type it out.
Exactly. Because they didn't mistype the syntax or place a loop in the wrong order or puzzle through the logic structure, they do not own the internalized logic. This is textbook false fluency.
They have the output, but not the skill.
Right. They feel like a genius until their boss asks them to tweak one single parameter to account for a new data source, and they completely freeze. This is where self-directed growth collapses into total dependency.
I see.
If you rely on meaning alone, you might look at that AI output and feel a false sense of ownership just because it solves your problem.
The only defense against this cage of dependency is the metacognitive audit. And how are you defining the mechanics of that audit in this scenario?
It is a ruthless, technical evaluation of your own boundaries. You have to sit down with that generated code and ask yourself incredibly strict, uncomfortable questions.
Like what?
Like, can I articulate the core logic of this function in my own words? Can I revise this specific loop meaningfully without breaking the overall architecture? Can I simplify this down to its absolute essentials?
Those are tough questions if you didn't write it.
Exactly. And the ultimate test is, can I continue this work if the AI were suddenly taken offline right now? If the answer is no, you are just a passenger riding in a polished, borrowed logic. You are experiencing the overflow of the cup. Meaning does not save the junior analyst when the code breaks. Metacognitive rigor does.
Well, I completely acknowledge the danger of overflow. If the AI is pouring technical complexity faster than your cognitive cup can hold, you will definitely drown in false fluency.
Absolutely.
But I'm not convinced by that line of reasoning because you are treating the metacognitive audit as if it operates in a vacuum of pure, cold logic. The audit actually works because of a profoundly human phenomenon known as resonance.
Resonance. Wow. Okay. I find resonance to be a very dangerous concept when we are talking about capability. It is highly subjective.
It is subjective, but it is deeply functional. Think about what happens at the very edge of our capacity. The best AI output doesn't just meet a sterile technical standard. It meets the human where the work feels, beyond me, but not alien to me.
But how does that build skill?
It gives language or structure to something the practitioner was already internally reaching toward. When that analyst sees the code and it resonates, when they recognize the elegant solution they were trying to articulate, that resonance sparks the existential ownership required to actually sit down and perform that grueling metacognitive audit you're talking about.
I'm sorry, but I just don't buy that. Let me tell you why.
Go ahead.
Resonance is merely a feeling of recognition. It is the psychological equivalent of nodding your head while reading a textbook. It feels good, but it absolutely does not do the hard work of internalizing the logic.
But it's the starting point.
You can feel profound resonance with a brilliant piece of software architecture and still have absolutely no idea how to build it.
I'd agree that resonance doesn't do the work, but it provides the reason to do the work. If AI is just an answer machine, then yes, the human is a passive passenger. But if the human applies meaning, the AI transforms into a pattern practice environment.
A pattern practice environment.
Yeah. Without meaning, why would anyone subject themselves to the difficulty of your metacognitive audit? Let me pose a question to you. With modern AI, we can generate infinite variations of solutions, code, text, whatever. Isn't the identification of resonance the primary filter that tells the practitioner which variation is even worth controlling in the first place?
Well, you do have to select an output, yes.
Right. Out of the millions of directions a project could take, meaning is the compass that tells us where to point our rigorous audit.
That is a compelling argument. But have you considered that without the audit, constantly checking your reality, resonance easily degrades into self-deception?
Self-deception.
Yes. You feel like you recognize the truth in the AI's output, so you assume you inherently possess the capability. And this brings us to the ultimate result of this entire process. We have to look at how this daily, unglamorous struggle at the edge of capacity actually transforms into expanded human growth.
Okay, where are we going with this?
I want to focus on the mechanics of the kinetic pivot.
The kinetic pivot. The transition point where scattered energy finally becomes executable design.
Exactly. Think about the daily reality of most knowledge workers. When meaningless variation is high, you are dealing with scattered ideas, inconsistent terminology, constant distraction, minor structural errors.
Just noise, basically.
Tons of noise. In this state, 100% of your cognitive attention is consumed by repair mode. You are just fighting to survive the workflow, putting out fires, chasing typos. You are moving horizontally with a lot of scattered speed, but you're getting nowhere.
Right.
Self-directed growth is literally the statistical translation of human performance. It is the process of reducing the standard deviation of all that noise, pushing the variance toward zero.
Reducing the noise.
Yes. When you successfully suppress the meaningless variation, your horizontal, scattered energy is suddenly redirected upward into vertical lift.
Oh, vertical lift.
That vertical lift is the higher order meaning and strategic thinking you keep advocating for. But the pivot itself is a statistical, structural event. You simply cannot access higher order meaning until the foundational noise is stabilized.
That's an interesting point, though I would frame it differently. I don't disagree that the noise must be reduced, but when I look at how we transform through this process, I see a story entirely driven by human agency, not just statistics. We aren't just adjusting standard deviations here. We are expanding our own capacity through a highly active cycle of engagement.
But how does human agency actively expand the capacity without the primary mechanism being statistical control?
By how we choose to move through the friction. Think about the life cycle of interacting with a new, complex AI output, right? First, you get the AI-collaborated structure, which gives you the immense advantage of bypassing the blank page.
Sure.
And cognitively returns to the structure, testing it against the reality of their project, against fatigue, against the timing of the real world.
Okay.
During this repeated stress testing, the weak points and the instabilities finally become visible. The practitioner then reduces that meaningless variation, revising and shaping the work. And finally, a human-owned capability emerges. The person can repeat, adapt, and explain the structure as their own.
But you just described variation control perfectly.
Did I?
Yes. Detecting instabilities and reducing meaningless variation is the exact definition of statistical process control.
Yes, but the entire cycle only functions because the human chooses to return. AI bypasses the blank page, but ownership only begins when the human can return to the generated structure, reshape it under pressure, and still recognize it as their own.
Okay, but
Wait, let me just finish this thought. The cup doesn't just hold the water. Through repeated, meaningful engagement, through the sheer friction of caring enough to fix the instabilities, the cup itself expands. Our baseline capacity grows. We don't just become vessels capable of holding more of AI's water. We become capable of generating our own oceans. Meaning is what transforms external compliance into authentic ownership.
I mean, expanding the cup is a fantastic visual. But I have to insist that the actual process of expanding that cup is painful and unglamorous.
It is hard work, absolutely.
Right. It is the process of finding exactly where your cognitive cup leaks and systematically patching it. You say the human chooses to return because of meaning. I say the human must have the rigorous discipline to stare directly at their own logic blindness and systematically cure it through the metacognitive audit.
It takes both, surely.
Well, authentic controllability is variation control. Even if it is guided by meaning, the control itself is the active ingredient that forces the growth.
You know, I think we are dancing around the same profound truth from two slightly different angles, but let's summarize where our positions have landed today.
Sounds good.
From my perspective, I maintain that self-directed growth in the AI era is fundamentally about meaningful self-shaping. Variation control is absolutely necessary. I readily concede that you cannot build a house without a stable foundation.
Glad we agree on that.
The ultimate motto of authentic control is returning with meaning. We do not stabilize the axis of our work just to sound like machines or to meet some sterile mechanical metric of productivity. We stabilize the axis specifically so we can act freely, to protect our unique human phrasing, our judgment, and our creative choice in a world flooded with automated content.
And my summary is that while meaning is a beautiful and, necessary destination, the rigorous observation of variation and the strict execution of the metacognitive audit at the edge of our capacity are the absolutely essential vehicles.
The vehicles, right?
Without actively reducing the noise, without ruthlessly asking the hard questions, can I revise this code? Can I explain this logic? Can I execute this strategy without the AI holding my hand? Higher order meaning remains completely inaccessible. You will simply drown in false fluency, mistaking the machine's capability for your own. The noise must be actively reduced before the signal can ever be heard.
Well, we certainly share the agreement that true capability is not forcing or rushing. It is a path to stable freedom rather than a cage of compression. And this leaves us with a critical question to ponder regarding our own daily lives.
Definitely.
Think back to that initial image of the pressure cooker versus the open, sky blue space. When you look at your own desk, your own workflows, and the tools you use every day, ask yourself, are your current practices creating a cage of sterile efficiency, demanding speed at the cost of your own deeper understanding? Or are you actively building a breathable architecture, a space where you can safely return, rigorously refine your edge, and truly own your self-directed mastery? Something to think about.